Hi, and welcome to Class Module 6. This module will want to focus on facilities, their design, construction, and facility management. Again, another one of those responsibilities that are essential for an athletic director to stay on top of their job. So the first few slides that we have here are going to show some new facility construction. Here we have the University of Georgia, and they built their indoor athletic facility at a cost of $30.1 million. And if we think about the millions that are spent every year on new facilities, then the upkeep and maintenance of those facilities, there's just too much at stake when you look at the investments involved to risk and liability, and then to not manage them properly. Here we have the Clemson University Athletic Complex at a cost of $55 million. University of Delaware at $60 million. And this is just a few pictures of the vast facilities that they have. And then the last one I have, there's one picture of this Northwestern University Athletics Program facility that shows an artistic rendering of an indoor football facility right on a beach. And because the facility was so vast and because it encompassed so much and what it could accomplish, there's a YouTube video that you'll see as a link just above this segment to get a better view of how much was actually done with this new facility at a cost of $260 million. So it's important that sports managers have a general knowledge of design, construction. If we look at the next point of facility management, and then the maintenance, so that way you upkeep and uphold the integrity of the facility over time. Jobs have become sophisticated so that more and more organizations are assigning personnel dedicated to the task of managing their facility. How your facilities serve your constituency, the students in some cases, and how they present themselves to the public, whether it be through recruiting success, the pleasurable experience that one might have from coming to a competition and using them maybe as an outside vendor, renter, or even a patron. And you'll have a great deal to do with how successful the programs are. Professional management can provide the patron with an enjoyable experience or an unenjoyable experience. Good management determines your ability to attract and retain tenants. Here's some questions we want to think about when we're talking about the facility design and construction. Some of the important aspects to the designing of the facility and doing it properly. Making sure that we're thinking about the life expectancy, and average, you want to get about 50 years lifetime expectancy, give or take, depending on the climate that you live in. And then waiting until a program pressure is applied makes it difficult to respond, meaning there's a resource issue, and then you got to figure out how you raise money and then do it at that moment. So reasons why a facility or a program might find themselves having problems inherent with the design of a facility, we can look at William Steer's report back from 1999 and see some of the major flaws that had caused some of the problems. One with poor planning, a lack of oversight, attempting to try to cut costs or corners, which ended up affecting the facility or the use and programming that you might potentially have with those cuts. Planners' lack of experience or with athletic-specific issues, failure to recognize the need for storage space for all the equipment and everything that you're going to need for hosting an event. Legal code and mandate any modifications that might be specific or inherent to facilities, either being indoor or versus outdoor. And then too much compromise during the planning phase, meaning you're taking things off the list or cutting back on things before you even getting into the building stages. So the keys to developing a practical and adequate facility, we have the planning stage, the schematic design, the design development, construction documents, and then the construction. We we want to think about what some of the pitfalls of the design phase are. Copying other facilities, making the same mistakes that they did when they designed the facility and not correcting them or fixing them. And then not consulting the teachers or the coaches who use the facility daily in performing of their professional tasks. Think about how many of you might have been involved in the planning or construction of a facility. And then think about what impressions those might have had. And then what did you learn from that experience? I may ask at some point for you to share some of those with us, and we'll take a look at each one of these phases. In the planning stage, you want to find out and get all the players together involved. And I don't mean the athlete players, I mean coaches and teachers and all the administrators who are going to be in essentially that building or using that space. It might be outside vendors or renters at some point down the line, or getting input from them, but articulate what you need. Think about what you want and then compare that to what you actually need. Sometimes the designs will get too big because you think about all the things you want, and it's like your eyes being too big for your stomach when you're putting a lot of food on your plate. And then visit other facilities. Find out some of the things in the area or in your region and compare options. Good place to start, maybe within your own conferences, and find out which of your teams in the conference might have some facilities that you can compare. Hire a consultant, and they will be able to potentially help you. And this isn't necessary, but it might be a good step in helping with planning, especially if you're going to be the first in the conference to start to build. An architect, this is a traditional path, but you can leave it all up to them because they're only as good as the people who advise them. And then design, build as an option. So when we think about design development, we want us to think about a request for proposal, also known as an RFP. Essentially, this will outline what is expected from a contract management organization. And I've set a link up in the canvas just above the video here so you have an idea. You're looking to give companies anywhere from 30 to 90 days to respond. And you need to let them know if this is going to be a bid process or whether bid proposals will be available to competitors. So when we start to look at the design and development and then the next steps, we're going to bid out the job, or we're going to want to get multiple people to give their thoughts as to how much they would charge for us to have this build be done. And so they're taking the architectural design and saying, I can do it for X amount. And usually you want to have anywhere from 3 to 5 of these so that you have a good comparison and know that you're getting the best deal for what's going to be done. Now, it's always important to remember, once the blueprints are designed, any changes that you make, you're going to pay for. So once we get started with the construction phase, there are some issues or elements that need to be considered before building. These may be the activity areas, teaching areas or stations, maybe it'd be classrooms. You might want to think of indoor versus outdoor classroom space, or even on deck and wet versus dry pool classroom spaces. Gyms and weight room areas, cardio rooms, classrooms, maybe a wrestling room, dance studios or a gymnastics space, an aquatic or pool facility might be another one that you may need to consider. And then the non-activity areas. Think about storage for either equipment or other needs of the facility or game management. Traffic flow. You're going to have a certain way for entrance as well as exit, maybe different spaces. Restrooms, office spaces, equipment and apparatus, physical plant needs. This might be a mechanical room or maybe elevator space, housekeeping needs and custodial closets, and then the equipment that would go with that. And then seating, laundry, maybe drinking fountains and cups-of-doors. And then you got to think about the building materials. Here you may have court surfaces, and some might be multi-use, some might be very specific. An indoor track may need to have a special type of fabric or surface versus maybe a wooden basketball court. And walls. Maybe you have an open layout for a design plan, or maybe you have walls that help separate some spaces, or even some type of barrier. Ceilings as well, or multiple floors. Then the lighting. Lighting can add or take away the amount of cost, and then you've got to think about the ongoing costs of lighting. Metal halide lights take on a lot of energy but put out a lot of light, and now the newer ones with the LEDs can put out a lot of the light and essentially pay for themselves within just a couple of years in the cost savings versus those metal halide or even sodium vapor type lights. And then the doors. What points of access are you going to have? Will you have multiple doors so that larger equipment for either cleaning or setup can be brought in? The HVAC, or heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems. Maybe you need multiple systems because you have different temperature needs in different areas. And then think about the locker rooms, the flooring, mats. Maybe it's indoor turf field composition or infill or even outdoor. So if we're in the facility management portion, we're going to talk about the operations being the most complex function of the sport facility management. It's going to involve our event coordinating, our engineering, security, maintenance, and then getting a management team with the personnel management and then supervision of all of the staff and workers. So think about the philosophy. Should provide the basis for establishing guidelines and a proper orientation to operation. Is profit the motivator, or is serving the community with programming and events? And then where does fiscal responsibility fit in? The policies will dictate the course of action selected from various alternatives to guide present and future decisions, and it should be developed from a mission statement. So with the procedures, think of the how of accomplishing policy, the established, traditional way of doing something. And then we can look at the organizational areas of an indoor facility management. And these might include security or safety and medical services, an emergency action plan, or risk management and preventative. Scheduling, booking, contracting, housekeeping all need to play a big part, as well as the maintenance and keeping things in proper and working condition. Parking and traffic flow, and then thinking about budget and cost control, so that way you're not spending too much, but you're also taking care and addressing any concerns you might have on down the road. Concessions and merchandising can help bring in additional revenue, as well as marketing and promoting with a strategic development plan. And then public relations, so that the events that you're doing are hitting and targeting the right part. And you'll notice the indoor and the outdoor, they almost mirror each other. The big difference may be, essentially, is the roof or the facilities, and not having to have the roof or the climate control atmosphere being a factor that you could control or have to manage. But then you end up having to deal with the weather, and that's another instance of just how you have to manage a facility and some of the complications that come into play with it. Well, that's all I have for this module. I'll have more for the next.